Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a doof media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, constant reader Scott Daly, and I am joined, as always, by my friend and co-host, Matt the Kid Freeman. And you better believe that happy crappy.
Of course I believe that happy crappy. Do you believe that happy crappy?
No, I don't.
Wrong answer.
I love this. I love this performance so much. I'm so happy with it. It's amazing. Just got to get some cores and everything will be complete.
Just need some cores. Best goddamn beer in the world.
And you better believe that happy crappy. Is that a real phrase? Listeners, is that a real phrase? I don't think it is. I think it feels like a kingism.
It feels like a kingism, but I also can't help but feel like King knew all these people, all these characters that he has. I feel like they're all like refractions of people that he knew.
That's fair.
And that this was this really annoying guy that he like maybe worked with at one point who would say this kind of stuff. And this is his revenge.
That's totally true. It might not be a real phrase in like that it was popular vernacular, but he might have heard someone that annoyed the shit out of him that said it all the time. I like that.
Yeah, because I've known Stephen King characters in my life. I don't know about you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
This week on the show, The Stand continues with chapters 47 and 48. We catch up with both Harold Lauder and the Trashcan Man, and they come to moments of great choice in their journey through this book. And both of them, I think we can say, choose pretty poorly, actually. Matt, what did you think of this week's chapters?
This is some great stuff. I mean, the Franny stuff, I guess you could say things are coming to a head with the Harold situation. Mm-hmm. We've sort of been waiting for this to happen for some time. And I mean, it's not like it's resolved, but a certain threshold has been crossed and now things are out in the open. The Trashcan Man chapter, I think, is one of my favorite chapters in the book. I really enjoy the Trashcan Man as a character because King just really flexes muscles that he doesn't normally get to flex because he's such an unusual character. Everything is so elevated and strange and fascinating.
I agree with you so much. And the weird thing for me is I never had a particular emotion about the Trashcan Man one way or the other in my previous reads. I mean, it's not that I disliked him as a character, but I didn't love him. I didn't love his chapters. I don't really remember the specifics of a lot of Trashcan Man chapters. But at this read, oh my God, I'm in this chapter is so good. It's a long chapter. It's 50 pages of our 75 pages of reading this week, and it's phenomenal. Like so much is going on here, and as we'll talk about in a bit, so much that wasn't in the original version of this book that I am actually very, very glad is in this one.
Cool. Yeah, I feel, this book has a lot of chapters that are in and of themselves short stories, and that tends to be my favorite sort of thing, and this is another one of those chapters. Yeah.
One interesting kind of consequence of the way we're doing this book, though, is like, it's been so long since we've seen Larry. I was thinking about that this week. I was like, I haven't seen Larry in like a month, it feels like, which is not how most people reading this book will have it. But it will be, I think, by the time we see Larry again, it will be at least 2 weeks.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, I miss old Larry. He's probably going to have like 12 people with him when we meet him again.
Probably. All right, Matt, you want to go ahead and just get into it?
Let's do it.
Let's begin with chapter 47. This is a Franny chapter for the most part, although, like we said, there is a brief bit at the end that we actually will jump into a bit of Harold's point of view. But we start in Franny's brain, and we get a little bit of an action sequence to open this chapter. And I think that action sequence actually has a pretty evocative opening line, doesn't it? Because the first lines of the chapter are, "When it happened fast."
Yeah. So just I thought you'd be amused to learn that before I could hit stop on my audiobook app last week, I heard just the very beginning of this chapter, which is when it happened fast. And then I hit stop and I was like, what happened fast? So yeah, I was tortured by that all week until I could finally get around to actually finishing it.
I feel like you messaged me, like we recorded last week on a Tuesday, and I feel like you messaged me on a Wednesday morning with a reaction to a quote in the back half of last week's reading.
Yes.
So like, I feel like that doesn't surprise me learning that you got this, because I feel like you woke up And the first thing you did in the morning was start listening to The Stand.
That's accurate.
I'm glad it tortured you all week, Matt, because that's what you get. You got to be quick on that pause button, okay,
Yeah.
buddy?
Yeah.
We're not fucking around here.
Yeah, just at all times. At all times, you got to have the phone ready to hit pause just in case the chapter ends.
Now the whole project is tainted because you had information going into last week that something was going to happen fast, and it
yeah.
It tainted your entire interpretation of the events of those chapters.
I knew that something was going to happen in the next chapter. It's all ruined.
Yeah, it's totally ruined. Totally ruined. So we begin this chapter a day after Perry and suicide, as our characters are motoring down the highway. Franny is once again thinking about her feelings about Stu, and of course, inevitably also thinking about Harold and the problem he presents in these feelings. When suddenly the plot intervenes, it feels like nothing's ever going to happen in this love triangle. And so the plot says, okay, we got to do something, and does something. It does, because our characters turn a corner and see four men with guns on the highway in front of a roadblock waiting for them. And we kind of immediately know, oh, this is bad. And I actually really love the way all four of our characters kind of react to this moment as like a perfect encapsulation of who they are, right? Because of all the men in this group, Stu is the one that realizes what's going on the quickest. Glenn is the one that's kind of slowest on the uptake, and dumb Harold is somewhere in the middle, but manages to make an ass out of himself regardless. But Franny beats them all in this moment. And it's not even that she understands what's going on, but just that she does. I love the text here. She did not fully understand the situation herself yet, but she knew the equation here was all wrong. 4 men, 8 women, her brain said, and then repeated it louder in tones of alarm. 4 men, 8 women. And so it's like she's just, world conscious enough to know that these numbers add up to a bad situation, and they're in trouble.
Yes, there's a bad ratio.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is an interesting Rorschach test of a story moment, because I don't think King really does directly tell us what's going on or how worried we should be. He really leaves us very few direct clues, because really these could just be some dudes that they run into, and the dudes are operating out of an abundance of caution. They have their guns out because it's like, hey, we don't know who you are, you don't know how we are, let's all just kind of, like this could have gone a very different direction, right? And so I don't know. It's interesting to me because I didn't necessarily instantaneously think like, oh, this is an ambush. Mm-hmm. I mean, I probably should have, because chapter begins when it happened fast, and it's like, okay, well, obviously it's something bad.
To your credit, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, nothing like this has happened to any of our characters yet. So it's not like you were necessarily primed for this to be the way the world is now.
Yeah, I will take that credit, because it doesn't seem like it's going to be the sort of story that's like a sort of Last of Us world where there's like roving bands that are running into each other. I mean, there's a sort of climactic battle that has been sort of foreshadowed as being a culmination of the story, but we haven't seen much, if anything, that's been like this right here. So yeah. But happen it does.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to talk to you about this action sequence a little bit here, Matt, because so basically what happens is the men have all guns trained on them, and the 8 women that have been enslaved by these men use this moment as an opportunity to kind of rebel against their masters and overthrow them. And the result is like a full-on gunfight, fist fight, gun in face fight, all that good stuff. And I'm curious what you thought about this action sequence, because if I'm being honest, it wasn't my favorite that King has ever written. I think writers sometimes get themselves in these difficult situations where they want to do these action sequences, but we have the problem of, oh, none of our characters, and therefore us, the reader, don't know any of the people involved in them. And like, so there are 8 women here, and there are 4 men, and none of which we know a name, and we know nothing about any of them, right? And so what the text has to do in this situation in order to explain what's happening is it has to do a lot of, the second man did X, the blonde woman, the bearded man, one of the girls reacted this way. And, it just, to me personally, it made it a little bit difficult to follow the thread of exactly what was happening. I mean, I got there eventually, but it definitely, like, I felt like I had to pause and slow down my reading and reread sections to fully absorb kind of the shape and the geography of the action sequence itself. And I've this is not just a thing with King. I've noticed this with a lot of writers, that when I don't know the people involved and we have to do a lot of the second man, the third man, the one over there, the one that did this, I just kind of, it loses me a little bit.
Yeah. I think simultaneously, I feel you in general, but I don't think this particular scene bothered me. I did get mixed up between like which of the women was doing what at what times, but like I don't think that bothered me, because I think that the whole tenor of the scene is like, this is how action kind of feels in real life. And by action, I should probably say violence. Mm-hmm. Everything happens way too fast for you to like think through your choices. Your perceptions are confused and muddled. Like really small events, like a single, miss of a shot, or like forgetting to turn off your gun safety for a second, can be the difference between life and death. And, good luck. Have fun thinking about that split second mistake you made for the rest of your life. So being confused about who's doing what exactly just puts you, I guess I felt like I was in the headspace of like everything's happening too fast to really process. So I don't mind that I might have missed the detail. Also, I think this might be one regard in which audiobook just helps, because like you're just kind of being pulled through the scene, Yeah,
perhaps. I don't know. I mean, it could just be like, I can't believe I'm about to relate an action sequence to poetry, but like it's one of those things where I need to just like let the action spill over me, instead of like trying to actually like clinically break down and understand exactly which woman is it that's doing this. It doesn't actually matter, right? Specifically because we don't know who these women are. So like, which woman hit him with the gun, which woman was the first one to scream, like this in the moment doesn't actually matter at all, because they're not actual characters to us quite yet.
I was just going to say, this is an interesting general thing about writing, which really comes to the fore in action scenes, where it's like, I bet that this might actually be kind of fun. Like if you and I drew a little map of where we thought everyone was, and like where the roadblock was and stuff, I bet that our maps wouldn't look very similar.
Probably, yeah.
And the thing is, it's because it doesn't really matter to the mechanics of the scene. And maybe sometimes in the edge cases it does matter, because you'll be like, wait a minute, I thought that woman was already dead. And it's like, well, no, that's just because the text wasn't overly specific about which woman did what. And but usually it's just like, yeah, it's fine. Mm-hmm. The amount of words required to nail down all of the ambiguities would be overburdening and would make it impossible to actually enjoy the writing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that totally, and I think I'm going to put this particular complaint of mine in the folder marked "Get over it, Scott," and not necessarily the folder marked "Get better, author."
Yeah, the pet peeves box is what I call it.
Yeah, that's good. I think the important thing here, though, is that Harold is a no good coward that throws his gun down the second someone gets his sights on him. He does manage to actually pick it up at some point and shoot a man in the elbow, and then pat himself very, very heartily on the back for it. What did you think of Harold's reaction to this whole sequence?
So this is going to be my only pro Harold remark this week, which is that, hey, at least he got a shot off.
Sure.
But now I'm going to retract that immediately, because I'm going to say, okay, so King could have had him just do nothing, right? King could have had him had the choice of this character be, he's a coward, he folds in on himself, he accomplishes nothing. But I actually think it's kind of important to the story that he does get that shot off, because we see that he is simultaneously cowardly and dangerous. He's the kind of guy who is capable of pulling the trigger ultimately when pushed, but his first reaction is to flinch and to hide. Mm-hmm. Another way of sort of phrasing this is like, what's better, the guy who deserts the fight and runs off, or the guy who deserts but then like sees that things are going well and then comes back and takes a few pot shots?
That's such a great point. Yeah, no, I love that so much. It's a great way of frame Harold as as even worse than just being a no good coward. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
But yeah, and that's, it's not necessarily obvious because in that moment it's like, fuck yeah, Harold, you did something, but it's like, well, I don't know, do we want the kind of Harold who behaves this way or not? So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even just and like it's his reaction to him doing something too. Like he's like kind of celebrating. Yeah, we got him, Stu. We got him. Yeah, we did it. We shot those guys. It's like, well, okay, Harold, I guess. Sure. Right. You technically shot one of them in the elbow. Good job.
Yeah. Right.
In the end, our heroes win the fight with the help of several of these new women. I particularly liked this part, kind of the way the punctuation mark at the end of the action sequence is this. Then the girl in the sweatshirt stood astride the third man's body and gave a long primeval scream of triumph that haunted Fran Goldsmith for the rest of her life. So like that's kind of remarkable in that, like, yes, it's a good thing that these terrible, terrible men were defeated by this group, and our characters weren't killed, and none of these women have to go through the terrible things they were going through. But man, it's just this is a moment of violence punctuated by something that terrifies Fran, and I think that feels really significant. That like this is the way the world is now, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. That's why we should be using like you just said, the word violence instead of the word action scene to describe this, because it's like, it's that sort of sick feeling, if you've ever, been around actual violence in real life, it's never exciting. It's like nauseating and terrifying, and so like the book really conveyed that sense of kind of the horror of in-person violence.
Yeah. I mean, Glenn's reaction to it is completely disturbed, like to the point where he's like desperately trying to like calm Franny down, even though it's him that needs calming down. I'm not saying Franny did not, like, it obviously incredibly affected Franny too, but like he's like doing the old, I'll tell the woman it's okay to mask my inability to deal with this at all.
Well, he's just like babbling.
Yeah. So these women that we meet here are named Dana Jurgens, Susan Stern, Patty Kroger, Shirley Hammett, and then there's also an unnamed woman who hasn't spoken yet, which is why they don't know her name. We kind of talked about this last week, but I do feel kind of overwhelmed by all the new names and faces King is suddenly throwing at us. Like, we spent pages and pages and pages with just a handful of characters, and suddenly there's so many more that I just get kind of lost. Like, if you gave me money right now to tell you which was the woman who screamed triumphantly, like which name went to that woman, I think maybe it was to Susan Stern, but I'm not totally sure. And I actually think this is deliberate, Matt. I think this is a very intentional choice that King is making here, where we're like, things are starting to speed up, people are starting to come together, the groups are forming, and we're beginning to feel kind of lost and overwhelmed in the bigness that of the world that is kind of returning. And I think that's on purpose.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I know it's my job to pay attention to the names, but my brain did kind of turn off when we got to all the names, and I don't feel like that's a huge mistake, because it's like King will focus more on them individually if they were actually important. As it is, I think we are just sort of supposed to get a bit lost in this deluge of new names.
Yeah. I think what's absolutely true is that first part you said, that like if Shirley Hammett is suddenly going to become key to the story going forward, King will absolutely remind us of who Shirley Hammett is before that moment happens.
Yeah.
So we got this moment here, and this is kind of what we talked about before, where Harold is talking to Stu about the fight, and he said, "By rights, we should be dead now," Harold exclaimed to Stu. "It's all right," Stu said. "Take her easy, Harold." "Sure. Negative perspiration," Harold said heartily. He fumbled jerkily in his pack, got a chocolate payday, and almost dropped it while stripping off the wrapper. He cursed it bitterly, and then began to gobble it, holding it in both hands like a lollipop. So this is one of those things that, like, I wanted to use this as an opportunity to actually talk about Harold's payday candy bar obsession, because we mentioned it a couple weeks ago with Larry's chapter, that this is a thing that like Harold was eating, and Larry was using them as like a trail, a Hansel and Gretel trail to Harold, but we didn't actually talk about the candy bar itself. And I think it's worth talking about, right? Because this is an interesting choice, right? It's not only we've chosen to kind of frame this character by his obsession with candy, but it's a specific candy. It's a payday, which is not, I guess, not the typical like candy you would reach for. You know, I mean, I think there's like a much more popular candy bars that if you were like trying to decide, oh, I'm gonna have a character whose thing is that he eats candy bars constantly. Would it be payday? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I can't even bring the logo of the payday to my mind. I mean, I know I've seen a payday before, but definitely not one of the popular ones that you hand out at Halloween typically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, you know, just to be very like literal surface level, I guess, like payday implies a kind of like as a word, right? Is like a kind of payment, a kind of
Yeah.
reward, you could say, a kind of and so it's like he's giving himself a reward
Yeah.
for what exactly he's self-stimulating. He's he's a sort of hedonistic person. And then of course there's the implication that like you have relatively little pack space, you have to carry around all of your food, and you're choosing to carry around presumably a ridiculous number of these candy bars, because otherwise you'd have run out by now, right?
Yeah.
So like he's prioritizing this sort of like self-soothing, self-rewarding, self-aggrandizing behavioral tick of his. Like instead of being like, hey, end of the world, maybe I should pack some protein. He packs the candy bars. So
Yeah,
it is interesting.
Yeah, I love everything you said there. I mean, there's something so gluttonous and childish about it, right? Like I enjoy a candy bar every now and then, right? But the idea of just eating candy bars kind of constantly, it feels like a thing a child would do, right? Especially with the way the writing is written here, like holding it in both hands like a lollipop. Like we're specifically, you know, using childish imagery there, that he's not just holding the candy bar and eating the candy bar, he's holding it in both hands like it's a lollipop. It's perfect imagery. And yeah, I mean, I love what you said about the name payday and the meaning there. I think to me the most interesting part about it is it's not just you're getting a payment, but you're getting an owed payment, which I think is kind of perfect for Harold, a person who thinks the world owes him a great deal of things that he hasn't actually earned himself. So he's convinced himself that he's got all these paydays coming, but he hasn't actually done anything to earn them.
Yeah, I love that he thinks he deserves all these paydays.
Yeah. So we hear a little bit of the backstory of these women, and I don't think there's too much of a point for you and me to go into the detail of it. It's really gruesome, though. Absolutely monstrous what these men were doing to these women. And I think that in and of itself is worth talking about, though, right? Because like we talked about a few minutes ago, so far we haven't seen a lot in this book to the level of monstrosity that we've seen this week. We've definitely seen shitty people, right? We've seen people do bad things. Like during the collapse, we saw the government do bad things. We've seen people like Julie who are mean and are ostracized from our characters' groups because of it. But this group of men that our characters have just stumbled upon, it seems like an escalation of a very specific type of horribleness. And I think one that actually this kind of serves as a way to introduce to us, the reader, the concept of how bad it could get when certain people are in charge, because we're going to kind of carry that forward into the next chapter for sure.
Yeah. It is really interesting to think about these guys because like the way they seem, the way they're described, they were probably already awful creatures before the virus.
Sure.
And they just kind of took this opportunity to exercise their worst impulses. That's the impression that I got anyway. And I think that's, that's one way of looking at this whole idea of the collapse of civilization is basically you've got all these people in the world. You run into them on your way to work or in the supermarket who, if there weren't a society around them, would be doing horrible, awful things. And this book seems to be sort of gesturing in that direction. That's maybe the worldview implicit in this book, actually.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's kind of terrifying to think of just how little separates the truly horrendous people from doing those horrendous actions. Yeah.
Because I find myself wondering, like, does Stephen King, the writer, see the world like this? And it doesn't really matter, I guess, for the sake of reading? I'm just curious. Does he think that there's just like all these really bad people kind of all around us who are basically remorseless, would think nothing of hurting you if they could get away with it, but because we live in a civilization, they know that they can't get away with it, and so they don't do it. At least the book seems to believe that, whether or not Stephen King believes that.
Yeah, I mean, my gut reaction to that, as you were saying it, was yes, I think he does, but not in like a. It sounds funny to say, but not in like a super cynical way. Like I don't think Stephen King's view on the world is like net negative, right? I don't think he like thinks the world is a terrible place with just filled with monstrosity. I think he thinks the world is good and evil, and I think these are constants that, you know, invade everything, that are part of everything.
Yeah, you know, Lord of the Rings has been on my mind even more than usual lately.
No way.
Like a lot more than usual. I guess people who are finding this out of time, it's because the new Rings of Power TV show just came on TV. But
someone emailed us asking if you were watching that, and I was like,
yeah,
of course.
Of course. And then I went and I watched, of course, and then I went and I watched Return of the King again, just because I had to.
Why not? Yeah.
I bring this up because, like, in the Dark Tower, there's the part where Eddie Dean is thinking about meeting the wise old elves, and the wise old elves are just the elderly people, and that's perfectly in keeping with The Stand, right? We've got Abigail; she's the wise old elf, and
Sure.
and then they go into Lud and they meet the orcs who live in the technological society and who are awful. And so I think what we have some orcs right here. I think Stephen King basically thinks of these type of people as being the orcs. They're violent. They're, again, remorseless. They're all about just like taking what they can get. They're very, you know, present focused, not long term, not trying to build anything. It really fits pretty well, especially if you kind of stretch it over to the Lud connection, because these guys and sort of all of the people associated with the Dark Man remind me of like the Lud folks quite a bit.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot. I think, you know, overall, to kind of put a cap on this, I think one of the things that we finished this spot of the book with is Stu kind of lamenting at the fact that they're all getting, quote unquote, wise to the way the world works now, right? And that being in and of itself sort of a tragedy, right? That they live in a world now where it requires you to be wise, or it requires where you're driving down a highway and you come upon four men just standing there, and the first thing you should think is, these men are going to kill me. And if you don't think that, you won't survive. But it is in and of itself a tragedy that is the way the world is. And it's good for our main characters to think this, because it means that maybe they have the impetus to try to change that, to change that truth. But it's still a bit of a tragedy.
Yeah, right. They've lost innocence, right? Because previously they had the privilege of believing that the world wasn't full of people like this.
Yeah.
And now they see the truth, which is actually a horrible truth that you kind of don't want to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. So from here, King does an interesting thing where we once again go back to the well that is Franny's diary. But I really like the transition he does here, because Franny observes Stu notice one of the new girls, which makes her immediately jealous, but of course absolutely delights Harold. And from that moment, we move into an as of before unmentioned diary entry where we learn actually that Harold tried to make out with Franny, right? So like we kind of cut immediately from this moment of Harold like, yes, this is my moment, to an entry in the past where Harold is textually told by the character, I am not interested in you. I will not be interested in you. And so we kind of see, oh, wait, he's not actually listening to any of this stuff, which helps build the case against Harold, which is continuing to be built here.
Yes. This is, I think this chapter sort of puts the clincher on it, because I was willing to sort of view Harold as a kind of like, well, you know, maybe he could be redeemed sort of character. And now, as of this chapter, it really doesn't feel like we're going to be going that way.
Sure. So yeah, Harold kind of approaches Franny, sits down next to her, and tries to kiss her. She freaks out and throws herself backward. I don't know how more clear you can be to someone, but I love the writing here. I let out a yell. Talk about history repeating. That was too much like the time with Jess out on the breakwater where I bit my tongue. Too much like it for comfort. I love this because it's textually taking Harold and making the comparison to the other weak man in her life, right? This man that she kind of knew was wrong for her. And so it's just more of the same for Franny. Like, this is exactly why. This is one of the many reasons why she is just not interested in Harold at all.
Right, yeah. So I made that connection to the moment with Jess before Franny pointed it out to me. So what do I win?
You win 2 king bucks.
Thanks. Cool.
Yeah, you're welcome. So Franny starts laughing at the absurdity of this whole situation, the absurdity of what just happened, but also the absurdity of it, comparing it to her old boyfriend, but also the absurdity of Harold himself, who kind of tries to summon his inner Humphrey Bogart when he leans down to check sure Franny's okay, which is, God, just a wonderfully sad, pathetic thing for Harold to do, right?
Uh-huh.
Of course, the laughing itself does not sit well with Harold at all.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that laughing hysterically after a guy tries to kiss you is not gonna not gonna be good. I'm a literary critic.
You're so good at this, Matt. You're so good.
Yeah.
So we get this line of text. It's a little bit long, but I wanted to read it because I think it's really the kind of Harold MO distinctually. He said, "I've seen that guy before. You better believe it, Franny. He's the guy that's the quarterback on the football team who just sits there in class throwing spitballs and flipping people the bird because he knows the teacher's got to pass him with at least a C so he can keep on playing. He's the guy who goes steady with the prettiest cheerleader, and she thinks he's Jesus Christ with a bullet. The guy who farts when the English teacher asks you to read your composition because it's the best one in class. Yeah, I know fuckers like him. Good luck, Fran." Then he just walked off. It wasn't the grand, trampling exit that he meant to make, I feel quite sure. It was more like he'd had some secret dream, and I just shot it full of holes. The dream being that things had changed, the reality being that nothing really had. I felt terrible for him, God's truth, because when he walked off, he wasn't playing at jaded cynicism, but feeling real cynicism. Not jaded, but as sharp and hurtful as a knife blade. He was whipped. Oh, but what Harold will never see is that his head has got to change a little first. He's got to see the world is going to stay the same as long as he does. He stores up rebuffs in the way that pirates were supposed to store up treasure. I love everything about this, Matt. There's so much to talk about here. Where do you want to begin?
Well, my favorite line in here is this distinction between jaded cynicism and real cynicism, as in, this a sort of cynicism that you use to make yourself seem worldly, or that maybe you use as a shield against the harshness of the world. But then real cynicism being like, I actually think the world is shitty and hates me, and thus I hate it.
Yeah.
Which is actually a very toxic mentality.
Absolutely.
And accurately characterizes, I think, Harold. So.
Yeah. And I love, for me, I want to kind of begin in his little speech here, his little speech that feels rehearsed, actually. It feels like he wrote this down in a book before he says it to her. But like, it's so funny because like, maybe this is Stu, right? Maybe everything he does to describe Stu here is totally accurate, but who cares? Like what does this have to do with anything, right? Like in his mind, what he's saying here is, I know exactly who this Stu guy is, and he's this lame, good for nothing nobody that's not going to amount to anything in life. And I think that fits perfectly with Franny's kind of understanding of how Harold doesn't understand the ways in which the world has and hasn't changed, right? Because Harold wants the world to be different, but is also still acting like things like, oh, you like the loser football player who dated the cheerleader? Oh, that's so lame. It's like, dude, the world ended. Like, what does it fucking matter if he like got skated by an English class because he was a jock? Like, what does that matter in this new world anymore? It doesn't. It doesn't at all. And Harold still treats it like it's one of the most important things, because everything in his world is framed by, as Franny kind of says, the world as he understood it. So
Mhm.
like, he thinks this is this brand new opportunity for this new world order, but this new world order is still inherently defined in what the old world order was, in his mind at least, and so he cannot break free of it at all.
Yeah, absolutely. He still views the world as having this dynamic, even though it's like,
Yeah.
I like what you said at the top there. Like so what? Stu has shown himself to be reliable, thoughtful
Uh-huh.
member of the team. Like first of all, I don't think he probably wasn't a jerk in high school, but like even if he was, why does that matter now?
Yeah.
Like Harold has this perverted sense of like justice and desserts, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like people who are mean to people like me don't deserve happiness. People like me do deserve, and it's like that. Number one, that probably was never a belief that served him. Number two, it makes even less sense now.
Yeah. Imagine thinking the jock nerd paradigm matters in the post-apocalypse. It's just stupid.
Right.
Yeah. And I think actually the one thing Perrion said in last week's reading is, not only is that a stupid paradigm to hold up, but it's actually the state of the world has kind of reversed it, in that like the value that you can be as the nerd in this new world order is less than that of person who has worldly knowledge of how to fix things and hunt and like all these other things.
Right.
Like the ability to think good is valuable, sure, but maybe not as valuable in this new world than it used to be.
For sure. Yeah. I agree.
Also, just like one more final thing here is that he I love the way she dismantles his storm off, right? This great, like he thinks it's this grand trampling exit, but it's not. It's, sorry, Harold, it's not.
Yeah, so this is interesting because all of this is one of the sort of rare instances where this is landing a little bit different as we're talking about it now, because now I know that Harold stole her diary and read all this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so like now you not only the first time you read this, you're just sort of like reading the story. You're like, okay, that this is a thing that happened previously. And now you're reading it, as we're talking about it, realizing like, oh shit, like Harold saw her saying this about him, and we know that he doesn't take it well. And that just makes it land a little bit differently.
Yeah, definitely. That's something I wanted to bring up with you last week, but I couldn't. But that is 100% true, is that when you go back and reread this book and reread every diary entry, you do so with that distinct knowledge that Harold himself is reading this, because she writes about Harold a lot in here. And I think the thing that stands out to me really, I think the thing that's going to stand out to Harold is all the negative things, but like, it is important to note here that she does actually care about Harold in her own way, right? She is not attracted to him. She is not romantically or physically interested in him as a person, but she cares about him. She feels responsibility for him. This is a thing that has been established from the very beginning, when they first started traveling together, that Franny felt responsible for Harold. And that has continued. Like, she is not, I don't think, and maybe you disagree with me on this, but I don't think she's avoiding the inevitable with Stu because she's afraid that Harold will flip out and hurt people. Like, I think she's doing it merely because she knows it will hurt Harold, and she doesn't want to do that, because she actually cares about him in her own way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if we had to pigeonhole it, I'd say that he was the little brother of one of her best friends, and so maybe she sees him as a surrogate little brother.
Yeah.
And there's a bit later on when she literally says like, I can't describe the way I feel about Harold.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which is a way of saying like, it's whatever it is, there's some annoyance, there's some love, there's some I kind of wish he would just go away, there's some I'm responsible for him. There's all kinds of stuff in there, and I love it because that comes through, and it comes through in her behavior.
Yeah.
But it's a total mismatch between the way he sees her and what he wants from her.
Yeah, because the one thing there is definitely not in there is any kind of romantic attraction at all. That is 100% clear. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
So Matt, we move from this diary entry into another entry that is Stu into Franny. I just want you folks to know that I sent that to Matt before we started recording and said, is this too much? So if you're hearing this right now and going, ooh, it's Matt's fault, not mine, because he didn't stop me.
Yep. Sorry. Or you're welcome.
That's right, folks. Our happy couple finally hooks up. I love this entire scene, Matt. I love the construction of it. I love how it plays out. I love how it ends. But one of the things I love the most is how when Franny approaches Stu, he's like sitting on a rock, watching the sunset, smoking a cigar and scraping the ashes from the cigar on his boot heel. It's like, I can't think of a more like stereotypically like manly thing that any character has ever done in this story. It's like this perfect picturesque man moment, you know. It's absolutely delightful.
Yeah, I seriously want to go buy some nice cigars and just sit on my porch and then scrape them on my boot heel after reading this.
I like smoking a cigar every once in a while. I don't think I could ever make a habit out of it, but it's fun to do every so often.
It's been years since I did.
Me too.
I once tried to get into pipe smoking, but I found it to be annoying to actually execute and gave up quickly.
Didn't the last time we see each other, we buy cigars with the explicit intent of smoking them, and then we didn't? I think maybe I'm making that up, but I think that happened.
That sounds like a thing that might have happened, but I definitely didn't smoke a cigar with you. So.
Yeah, no, definitely not. So Stu and Franny post coitus talk about their dreams, and they get into kind of like this important thing that I think I want to talk to you about this, because there's this thing that writers do where they use dreams to prophesize knowledge, right? That a character couldn't know. So we get two things in this moment, two bits of knowledge that the characters couldn't possibly know about outside of their dreams. The first is that the old lady, who we know as Abigail Fremantle, has left Nebraska. The second thing is that the man in black is now crucifying people in his desert stronghold, which we're told here is probably Las Vegas. And I think the fun thing about the technique that is done here is, because we've already read the chapters in which Nick and the rest of them met Abigail and then left, we know that the first thing there is true. We know that's true because we witnessed it. We don't know the second thing is true, but because the first thing has been proven true by the dreams, we can then assume number two is true without question. So when we are told in the book, the man in black is holed up in Las Vegas and he's crucifying people that don't listen to him, we just kind of accept that as fact. And it is. So it's a really great way of introducing information to us in an otherworldly way, but in a way that gets us to accept it immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think this is one thing we talk about with King often. Another thing that it does is it kind of, robs us of the surprise of finding out later that he's crucifying people. Because the moment where they crucify Heck later on could be like a sudden shocking twist, right? But like, this is King's number one writing lesson for us all, is the surprise isn't worth as much as the anticipation. Kind of knowing that he's doing this sets you up to be like prepared later, and you know what's coming, and that anticipation is actually kind of more savory than if you were just taken off guard by it.
Yeah,
I'm struggling to learn this lesson, honestly, because my writing instincts, I don't know why exactly, but I so often lean toward the shocking reveal or the secret that is held out and then revealed later. And King like never does that. He's so consistently just like, and this is what's going to happen, and then that's what happens, and you're always like, yeah, like that let me look forward to it or dread that happening, and then it just lands all the harder when it finally does.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this specific instance, what it does for us is when we get to the Trashcan Man scene with the crucifixion, we are just a few seconds ahead of our character, right? And so that allows us to frame the moment in his reaction to it and not our reaction to it. So we are focused on how does Trashcan Man react to seeing someone's about to get crucified? That seems really important to his character. And perhaps if we had kept the idea of the Man in Black crucifying people a secret, our shock would have kind of glassed over Trashcan Man's response to it, which I think is the most important part of the scene.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. Yeah.
So the other thing they talk about is other people, right? They say, basically, we're passing people nearly every day. They just hunker down and wait for us to go by. They're scared of us, but they'll come to her, I guess, in their own good time. Or to the other one, Franny said. I love the way this book has kind of introduced the inevitability of societal like cohesion in a way. Like it uses the concept of Mother Abigail on one side and Randall Flagg on the other side as kind of like a spiritual catalyst to the forming of society again. And maybe like in reality, if something like this were to happen, we possibly wouldn't like coalesce as quickly as is happening in this story. But we've kind of added this other bit, this metaphysical, magical force that is speeding up. I think what the book has kind of said is a natural inclination of humanity. I don't know. I just love the inevitability of, the gathering of sides and the inevitability of the conflict because of that gathering.
Yeah. Or if there was coalescing, then it would be more than just two locations, but
sure.
But as you say, this gives a sense of inevitability that there's basically two poles of this magnet. You're going to go to one or the other. There's no third option.
Mm-hmm. So they have sex, Matt, and it's like real good. It's like the best. This is so good. So good.
It's haven't showered in months sex.
Oh, gross. Oh.
Do they even have toothbrushes? Do they have?
I assume so. There's still toothbrushes and toothpaste, and a lot of places still have running water.
Okay.
So.
Well, that's good then.
So they're talking after, right? And they inevitably talk about Harold because it seems like everything kind of heads back to Harold. And I just wanted to point out what is said here because I think it's interesting. Stu says Harold's got a way to go, but he's got the makings of a fine man somewhere inside him if he'll toughen up. You like him, don't you? And her response is the quote that you said earlier. That's not the right word. There isn't a word in English for how I feel about Harold. And I think we've already talked about Franny's response, but the thing I want to talk about here is Stu's, right? Stu says here, he's seen the same Harold that we've seen. He's seen the same Harold that Fran has seen. And maybe he's less aware of how uncomfortable he makes Fran just because he's not the one experiencing it. But he has belief in Harold. He believes Harold can be a good person. Yeah, like he's got the makings of a fine man somewhere inside him. So like that's a vote of confidence from Stu towards Harold. And I think that's really important that Harold is not a great person. I think we can confidently say that now, but that doesn't mean he could not be. And I love the ways in which this moment in particular is reinforcing this idea that like, there are people that actually do have your back, Harold. Like Franny does care about you genuinely. Like she doesn't want to date you or be with you, but she cares about you. Stu like would probably be the type of person that would try to guide you to being that good man, to toughening up, to finding that version of yourself. Like these are people that would support you if you would let them. And he's not gonna.
Yeah. I don't think Harold is ultimately going to make the right choice, but I think that the story is very clear that he has that choice, right? Mm-hmm. It is he has that, much like Larry. A lot of comparisons to Larry this week. I feel he's another character who is given a clear opportunity to choose good, and it's within his power to do so. He's not nearly as sort of deeply metaphysically fucked over as the Trashcan Man is. Mm-hmm. And yet I'm pretty sure, we're going to see him make the wrong choice, which if anything makes me hate him more than I could ever hate the Trashcan Man. Like the Trashcan Man, I'm like, whatever that guy ends up doing, I just feel bad for him. Cause he's, but Harold, it's like, come on, Harold. Like seriously.
Yeah. So this scene ends with Harold in the background having just watched the entire thing. So that's not good. You shouldn't do that.
I'm beginning to see why Harold is bad.
You're beginning to.
Yeah.
I want you to go back and listen to the episodes on our first introduction to Harold, and just listen to yourself talk about him. Because it's a treat. It's a treat.
I'm sure it is. I mean, it's not like I feel like I made any mistakes. I think he's one of the characters where we're being introduced to a character who could go either way.
Yeah.
And then we week upon week we see what way we're going to go.
Yeah, and to be clear, I wasn't saying, hey, you had the total wrong read on this character, you idiot. I was just saying it's really fun the way I think this character was set up.
Yeah.
And
sure.
Yeah, like we don't necessarily immediately have entirely negative opinions of him, but it's certainly going that way. Yeah.
Yep.
So from here we cut on over to another diary entry where it's post Stu and Franny hooking up, and this diary entry really just serves to introduce Harold's grin as this thing where he's kind of decided to just be like really, really grinny, and it's scary. It's real scary.
It's
I don't like it.
I didn't make the connection till now, but it reminds me of how the Dark Man is portrayed as having this like horrible grin on his face all the time.
No, I like that. I don't know if I've ever made that connection myself, but I like that. So then the text cuts over to Harold himself as he wakes up in the middle of the night and decides to go steal Franny's diary from her backpack while she sleeps. I think the important thing here to talk about is we're in Harold's head for the first time in the book, Matt. We're seeing from Harold's point of view. We're seeing Harold's thought process. What do you think? What do you think of being in Harold?
Well, I guess this poked a hole in some of my more generous interpretations of what Harold is like on the inside. Or maybe another way of saying this is, what we're about to see. There's this small voice inside Harold that is sort of the voice of reason and goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I knew it was in there. I knew he had that voice in there, right? But it's like, well, I don't think he's going to listen to the voice, and so it's not like we were wrong. It's not like we were wrong. It's that we were too optimistic.
Yeah, no, I get that. And speaking of that, I wanted to read this section here. As he trained its beam on the front cover of the spiral, there was a moment of sanity. For just a moment, part of his mind cried out, "Harold, stop!" so strongly that he was shaken to his heels. And stop he almost did. For just a moment, it seemed possible to stop, to put the diary back where he had found it, to give her up, to let them go their own way before something terrible and irrevocable happened. For that moment, it seemed he could put the bitter drink away, pour out the cup, and refill it with whatever there was for him in this world. Give it over, Harold, the sane voice begged. But maybe it was already too late. I bring this up because I think there's actually a perfectly reasonable line to draw between Harold in this moment and the Trashcan Man in the next chapter that we'll see, where, I think last week Glenn said something that I wanted to kind of focus on right now. That this idea that our characters have been giving this power of premonition, and they have done so in Glenn's mind in order to give them the ability to choose to avoid the bad fate, right? Like he kind of compared it to this ability to know when an airplane is going to crash and get a stomach ache that avoids you getting on the plane. They're being given this premonitions in order to avoid the bad fate that awaits them. And that's kind of what's happening here. Like Harold is being given this moment of choice, this moment of, you can actually turn away from this path if you want to. And I think it is really interesting that the way we end this whole thing is maybe it was already too late. Maybe I've already gone too far down this path. I've already passed the point of no return. And so actually I don't have a choice at all, Harold is arguing here. And I think we will see a very similar argument come from Trashcan Man in a few minutes here, right? This idea that, we do have a choice, but maybe we don't.
Yeah.
And I think in Harold's case, that's just bullshit. Like, I think Harold has been a little creep, right? He's been creepy. He's made Franny uncomfortable, but he hasn't actually really done anything wrong, right? Like he hasn't done anything bad yet. Like there's perfectly there's an ability to step back from all this. He is totally right that there is, and yet he chooses to just abdicate the responsibility to actually make that choice.
Yeah. Yeah, he could totally make a different choice. It's like, well, the only reason you can't make a different choice, Harold, is because it would kind of feel bad and uncomfortable for a while.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's intolerable for me to have to feel bad because I'm Harold and I don't deserve to feel bad. I deserve to get my paydays, and and that, you know, and also this is what I've come to expect of the world, you know, that all of that garbage. But yeah, no, I like, you know, this thread you're drawing, like it's also connected to Larry, where Larry has this moment, I think it was a couple weeks ago now, where, you know, he sort of was like, well, fine, I'm not a nice guy. And then he kind of backed down from that and kind of resumed the struggle, right? The struggle of making hard choices. Still not perfect, Larry, but at least he's willing to make choices instead of just abdicating, as you said. I think abdication of choice is sort of a key source of evil in King's universe.
Yeah, no, totally, I agree. So abdicate he does, and he decides to read the entirety of the diary, and that night, after he finishes reading the diary, we get this. He went back to his sleeping bag. He masturbated bitterly. When sleep came, it was thin. He dreamed he was dying halfway down a steep grade of tumbled rocks and moonscape boulders. High above, riding the night thermals, were cruising buzzards, waiting for him to make them a meal. There was no moon, no stars. And then a frightened red eye opened in the dark, vulpine, eldritch. The eye terrified him, yet held him. The eye beckoned him. So like it's this really wonderful moment of like, you were at this moment, Harold. You were at this threshold. You chose, and who's there waiting for you on the other side? It's the man in black. He's waiting for you there. Hey, buddy, you did the right thing. Come here. Let's go. Let's dance.
And it is interesting. I love how this lands, because he refused to talk about his dreams previously, and so now we see, like, okay, he's having horrible nightmares about the eye. It's so good, so great.
Yep. After another cheerfully creepy conversation with Franny the next morning, our chapter ends on a note that feels a little ominous, right, Matt? It ends on, that night, Harold began his own journal.
Yeah, or what will probably be later referred to as his manifesto.
I love that. Yeah, no, I think that fits the whole incel thing. Do you think, I mean, I guess now that you've gotten to know him a little bit more, do you think that is still an accurate description of Harold?
I mean, it seems more accurate than, like, before. It was almost just like he could go the incel direction, or he could go any other number of directions. But now it's like, no, he seems to have identified himself as the aggrieved, the one who deserves things and is not getting them. And therefore I'm going to get my revenge on the world, which is that sort of archetype of human being that we've now in this year labeled incel. But I think obviously it was a sort of archetype that has existed, I don't know, possibly forever.
Forever. Yeah, I think so.
Definitely, when King was writing the book, clearly. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, so we say goodbye to Creepy Harold, and we say hello to the absolutely wonderful and also a little bit creepy Trashcan Man with chapter 48. We catch up with Trash as he catches his first sight of Las Vegas, or what he calls Cibola. For those that don't know, this is another name for the 7 cities of gold, aka El Dorado, aka, I don't know, they had like 20 different names for the city of gold, actually.
Really?
Because there's so many different names for this thing. I think the important thing to note here, though, is that it doesn't exist. It's not real. It never existed. It was never a thing. And I think that's kind of a perfect way to start this chapter, right? As Trashcan approaches this mystical city of gold that isn't real. And we see here that the idea of Las Vegas as this kind of promised land for him and people of his ilk is also just an illusion, a mirage.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Yeah, as we get into this, just going to reiterate, this is one of my favorite chapters. Just, man, what a narrative.
It's so remarkably good, and I love what you said about it kind of being a mini story, because I think it is like this mini little contained story within this greater story. Like, a guy makes it to the place he's going and has a certain reaction there, and then we see how he got there, and it culminates in him, getting his greatest wish of getting to meet the man himself.
Yeah.
So we quickly learn that Trash, never fully sane at the best of times, has in this moment gone completely insane since we last saw him, and we're about to get to see kind of a whole chapter that examines exactly how that happened, right?
Yeah. But like insane in a way that still permits him to be a fully fleshed out character. I think that's interesting, right? Because as we were going into the chapter, I was like, how are we going to write it from the perspective of somebody who's just like raving? But it's interesting because there is some amount of raving, but he still kind of remains a human being at the core of it.
Sure.
I really enjoyed how that was executed.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing we see about Trash here is that he's fully committed himself to the Dark Man, saying over and over again, "My life for you." That's kind of one of his constant refrains. And we get this as well. He who is the Dark Man, the hard case. He waited for Trashcan Man in Cibola, and his were the armies of the night. His were the white-faced riders of the dead who would sweep out of the west and into the very face of the rising sun. I just love, first of all, this writing is phenomenal, but I also love Trash calling the Dark Man he who is. I think it makes a perfect contrast with Abigail's reference to God in last week's reading of, referencing the moment with Moses of I am that I am. And so like God is I am that I am. And the devil is he who is. I think that's just remarkable.
Yeah. I like that. Also, the paragraph you pulled out, I can't help but notice there's like a very fun mixture of Nazgul and Antichrist imagery.
I love it. Yeah.
I mean, there specifically, but also sort of throughout. But yeah, I mean, the idea of the man in black, I think I identified him with the Witch King previously. Mm-hmm. But this is even more of a direct Nazgul reference where we have, basically black riders, white-faced riders, riders of the dead.
I love it. So in patented King style, we now flash back and actually spend the entire chapter jumping back and forth between the present day and the events that led Trash to this present moment. We've talked here about why this works so effectively for King in the past, so I'm not going to beat that dead horse again here, but just going to say this continues to work extremely well. This method, this structure of storytelling that King uses so often here is just phenomenal. It's great. It keeps working. It just keeps working.
Yeah, works so gosh dang well. You almost wonder why you don't see it more in other stories. Like, I mean, obviously it's an established literary technique. It's not like King invented it, but King makes it look so easy that you're like, this is how all stories should be told, obviously.
Yeah, no, you're so right. So the first thing we learn is how Trash burned his arm very badly, because that's one thing we noticed is his left arm is extremely badly burned. I don't think it's a surprise to learn that he burned it on a fire because he's setting things on fire, and he burns his arm really badly when one of his fuses goes off a little early.
Still,
it is in this kind of pained, slightly stoned state that he has his first dream of the man in black, and it's an interesting one here. I want to talk about some of this here, Matt. In his dream, the Dark Man came in his hooded robe, his face invisible. Yet the Trashcan Man thought he had seen this man before. When the loungers in the candy store and the beer parlor back in Potentville catcalled at him, it seemed that this man had been among them, silent and thoughtful. When he had worked at the Scrub-a-Dub, scrub-a-dubba, soap at the headlights, knock the wipers, soap the rocker panels. Hey, mister, you want hot wax on that? Wearing the sponge glove in his right hand until the hand beneath looked like a pale dead fish, the nails as white as ivory. It seemed he had seen this man's face, fiery and grinning with lunatic joy from beneath the rippling film of water rolling down the windshield. And it goes on from there. Basically, every moment of sadness and tragedy and suffering in Trashcan Man's life, he sees that the man in black, the dark man, was there the entire time. And I think this is really interesting, right? Because despite this, the man in black offers in this dream Trashcan the world. He says, you will be the head of my artillery. And Trashcan eagerly accepts this, despite knowing that this man is symbolically, the man behind all his ills that he's faced throughout his entire life.
Yeah.
And he accepts it all. He accepts him, and he starts heading towards Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure if I have that totally nailed down, but what struck me about it is, like, for somebody like Trash, abuse is all he knows. It's the only world he's comfortable with. Kind of reminds me of how Harold is kind of still stuck in the previous world. For Trash, that's the only world that makes sense to him, is one where he is burning stuff and being abused and being taken advantage of. And so when that relationship is offered to him by the dark man, he accepts it.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I think that's certainly true. I also think it's just part of the general tragedy that is Trashcan Man, right? Mm-hmm. That he's actually a character who seems immediately capable of knowing that this dude is bad news, that he's, maybe being false or laying out a mirage in front of you. I mean, just the decision to call the place that he's going Cibola is seemingly subtextually or subconsciously in Trashcan's brain, acknowledging that it's a mirage, that it's an illusion, that it's not real. And yet, because of, a lot of things in him that are outside of his control, he goes anyway. I think that is the essential tragedy of Trashcan Man.
Yeah, I like that.
I do love this part, Matt. It's a small part, but I love this part where, as we're kind of fast forwarding through Trash's, immediate journey, we kind of orient him based off of our other characters. So, like, it says on July 4th, the day that Larry found the corpse of Rita in the tent, Trash got a bicycle. On July 8th, the day that Nick and Tom blah blah blah, Trash crossed the state line. It's just like it continues on that for a while, where all the big events of his journey west are kind of punctuated with this frame of where the other characters were at those moments. I don't know. It's just, I think it serves to kind of connect him and anchor him to the story in a way he hadn't been yet. I think it's really effective.
Yeah, that's cool. It's a cool idea, because you're right. Otherwise, there is something of a risk that you feel like, what the hell does this have to do with anything? Because he's so disconnected. But yeah, it's good.
We also see that when Trashcan enters Nebraska, he stops dreaming of the Dark Man. The Dark Man dreams go away, and instead, the only dream that is left is Mother Abigail. And so he dreams of her the same way all the other characters did.
So The Shining respects state lines.
It's remarkable that way,
Yeah, very respectful.
You're not going to get The Shining to cross any borders into another country, too. Not without a passport.
Yeah, right. Then it would become a matter for the FBI, and it just becomes really messy.
I do love the dream he has here, though, Matt, because the dream begins as it begins for all our characters, right? He's in the middle of a cornfield. He kind of moves the corn out of the way, and he sees this little house in the middle of the cornfield, a woman on the porch playing on her guitar. It's soft, calming music. And suddenly, in the dream, the woman stops playing, sees the Trashcan Man, and says, "There's a weasel in the corn." Which, of course, there's we've been told last week that the weasel imagery is very specific to Mother Abigail. And in this moment, Trashcan Man turns into that very weasel, turns into that thing. But I mean, I want to talk to you about this, because, like, this doesn't quite sound like Mother Abigail, does it? There's something off here, because I also like the part at the very end of this where it says, for Mother Abigail's part, she woke up having a weird dream, barely remembering a dream that kind of just made her sad, and filled with pity. And so, like, I don't know. I just feel like the Man in Black's doing some fuckery here. Like that, like, oh, we didn't dream of the Man in Black here at all, but like we dream of Mother Abigail, but then something intervenes to make it clear that that path is not an option for you, Trashy. You can't go there. You won't be welcome there. No one will welcome you there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it feels like maybe there was some vestige of Abigail present in the dream, but the Dark Man muddied it up and corrupted it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And now we come to the kid, Matt. And I think we'll start this whole section with saying, I think this is the thing that most people know about the different versions of the Dark Tower, or the Dark Tower of the Stand. The big change that most people are generally aware of is in the original version, there was no kid. He was not in the book at all, and was added back in this version. So this chapter was actually pretty extensively added to, I think.
Wow.
Excuse me.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I never would have guessed that. The kid seems like such a thesis statement.
Yeah, he does, right? And I think, you know, there is some of the events of this chapter still happen. It's just not the kid. It's just kind of an old crazy man. Like the night in the hotel still happens. The big thing that does not happen is the wolves, and the way the wolves, you know, trap the kid, and the way the wolves guide Trashcan through the tunnel, which is a huge change, right? Because I think that is very, very important to Trashcan's character as well.
Yeah, sure. It sounds like that's part and parcel with the sort of original version having a lot of the supernatural stuff removed from it.
Yeah, true.
And this one having it put back in.
True.
It's cool.
But the kid, Matt, well, he's sure something. He is sure something. You better believe that. Happy crappy. Before we see the kid, though, we see his car, and I think this is so delightful to me. It was a 1932 Ford Deuce coupe, but the owner had not stinted nor stopped with the usual Deuce coupe customizing innovations. He had gone on and on, turning it into a parody of all American cars, a glittering science fiction vehicle with hand-painted flames billowing out the manifold pipes. The paint job was flake gold. The chrome headpipes stretched almost the whole length of the car, reflected the sun fiercely. The windshield was a convex bubble. The back tires were gigantic Goodyear-wide ovals, the wheel wells cut to an exaggerated height and depth to accommodate them. Growing out of the hood like a weird heating duct was a supercharger. Growing out of the roof, solid black but shot with red flecks like embers, was a steel shark fin. Written on both sides were two words, raked backward to indicate speed. The kid, they said. What a car. What a fucking car. Christine, eat your heart out.
It's beautiful. It's Christine's a great reference. I was actually thinking strictly about the Lowman cars and how they're this sort of like dark mirror mockery of Americana, especially due to the story they occur in, or at least originate in. Yeah. And here it's like this is a sort of the most American car that ever Americaned.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And that's like the exaggeration of it. And because again, we haven't talked about it recently, I guess, but like a while ago, especially when like we were in the, you know, viral pandemic part of the book, it was like, oh, this book is a critique of America. And this feels like more of that thread coming back.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love that line, a parody of all American cars. And I think the kid is a parody of Americana in a lot of ways too, right? Like he is this almost comically absurd rendition of the 1950s greaser type archetype, right? Like, but again, like the car itself, exaggerated to an absurd degree, like overblown, like he's the Fonz, but on steroids and insane. And what did you think of the kid, Matt? Do you love him? Do you love the kid?
Oh my God. The kid makes me so freaking uncomfortable. It's hard to even put my finger on why exactly. Like, I don't know if I've instantly hated anybody in a book worse than this. And it's also interesting because like, I can't really say I've ever met anybody like the kid because he's such an exaggerated caricature.
Sure.
But at the same time, haven't we all met somebody like the kids, somebody from like the type of human being that the kid is caricaturing?
Yeah.
Even if not that extreme. I mean, I'm thinking specifically about just how like unpleasant and like uncomfortable he is to be around.
Yeah.
Like he's unpredictable, and like if he says like, "Hey, you agree with that, Haas?" and you're like, "Yeah, I agree with that," he's like, "Ah, wrong answer, Haas." You're like, "What the fuck?" Like, "Fuck you!" Like, and he's violent too, so you can't just kind of like argue, right? And you really feel for Trash during this whole section.
Yeah, you do. You really do, and I think that's part. It's great because it's part of the tragedy that is Trashcan Man, right? Is that this experience is awful. It's terrible, and it just so happens that it cements him in his belief system of the Dark Man and everything the Dark Man represents, which is great. I think I love the line that like when he's considering his choice, he's like, well, the Dark Man saved me, so I have to support him because he's the one that used his power to save my life. And the book goes that the Dark Man sent the kid there to do this very thing never entered Trash Can's mind, right? But I mean, we do kind of see that the kid, after Trash, manages to stumble into the right things to say, like invites him to come with him because they are heading to the same place, right? They are heading to LA, or sorry, to Las Vegas, LV.
Yeah.
And so it is very possible to think, oh, well, of course the Dark Man, maneuvered the kid to bump into Trash Can here in this very moment, to go through this ordeal, to kind of force this guy onto his side, to make him think that, oh, you owe me now, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, the text doesn't say like that's definitely what happened, but it certainly leaves open the interpretation.
Yeah, yeah. So back in the present, Trash Can finally reaches Cibola. I love the writing here, man. I just like overall King gets to have fun with the writing in this particular section in a way that I think maybe doesn't feel free to in the other characters, because those characters are just a little bit more grounded, and so the writing can't be as extravagant and wild like it is here. Like listen to this. But what captured his eyes was what stood on the grassy quadrangle between the parking lot and the entranceway. Trash Can stared. An orgasmic shivering consumed him so fiercely that for a moment he could only prop himself on his bloody hands, the unraveling end of the ace bandage trailing between them, and stare at the fountain with his faded blue eyes that were halfway to being glare blind by now. A little groaning noise began to escape him. Like he's having so much fun in this chapter, I think King is,
Yeah.
which is wild considering how awful all the actual events of the chapter are.
No, but yeah, it's so like elevated and almost like the religious mania, which is going to get called out explicitly later, is such a sort of fun lens to see the world through.
Mm-hmm.
So much more. I don't know. It's just enthralling. Is what it is.
Yeah. So back with Kid, they spend the night in a hotel. The Kid continues to be an absolute terror. He threatens to kill Trash if he doesn't chug a beer in one sip, and then he joins him in bed for a sequence that I think would feel right at home with Roland and his gun abortion from the Gunslinger, where he sodomizes Trash Can Man with his gun while jerking him off. This is a lot. This is a lot of a scene, right? And I guess I just wanted to approach it by getting your opinion on this whole thing.
Well, yeah. So I mean, mainly it just makes me fucking hate this guy and look forward to his demise even more than I already was.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I'll note we don't actually see his demise. We just kind of fades out. So maybe he'll come back. I don't know. But it also even further increases our sympathy and pity for Trash. And I'll just go ahead and make the reference, which maybe you knew I was going to make, which is that he's a pitiful, obviously pitiful Gollum figure, right?
Mm-hmm.
He is the Gollum figure. This goes a long way to humanizing him, making us wish he'd catch a break for once. I think it sets us up to understand how far he's willing to go when he's later shown some kindness when he finally, gets to the casino hotel. And overall, it's just a scene that I think that just kind of turns all the dials on our willingness to sort of see this guy as pathetic and sort of out there as he is, as somebody worthy of pity.
Yeah, I love that. I it's one of those things where I did not want to make the Gollum comparison for you because I was kind of waiting for you to make it yourself, and I'm very happy that you did. I think you're absolutely right here, especially this week because like we kind of see here one of the things we get told is that he was no longer Donald Merwin Elbert, right? He was the Trashcan Man now. So we've got these kind of Gollum Smeagol personalities that we've developed here, and he's
For
kind of
sure.
chosen to embrace the Gollum, and or maybe that's the wrong term, not chosen to. It's kind of been chosen for him.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to approach the moment where the decision is made, or he realizes it already has been made.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, so from here, we basically he goes through this whole horrible ordeal and decides in this moment that that's it. I'm gonna leave. I'm gone. But the man in black comes to him in his dreams that night and says to him, "No, wait. I will demonstrate my power to you in the mountains. So just wait and see till then," which is ominous and terrible, and actually kind of awesome too because we hate we hate the kid so much.
Yeah, isn't that fun that we're actually kind of rooting for the man in black to do something horrible to this guy because he has hurt poor Trashcan Man so badly.
It is remarkable because yeah, you kind of find yourself kind of swept up into it. And you're like, "Fuck yeah, get him, man in black." Wait, wait, wait. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. So we cut back to the present as Trashcan wakes up on the pool table he collapsed on and finds himself meeting an old friend of ours. We get to see Lloyd Henreid. True to his word, Lloyd has seemed to be established by Randall Flagg as the number 2 in Flagg's army. So he's doing very well for himself, our Lloyd. We haven't seen him since he was eating people in prison, but he seems to be doing pretty good for himself, Matt.
Yeah, much better now, for sure.
Then we get this bit here. Trashcan Man shook the offered hand and had to struggle to keep from weeping with gratitude. So far as he could remember, this was the first time in his life someone had offered to shake his hand. He was here. He had been accepted. At long last, he was on the inside of something. He would have walked through twice as much desert as he had for this moment, would have burned the other arm and both legs as well. It's really, really sad moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that I love about this is, and I think we can say now, is that society failed Trashcan Man, right? Like he was this boy who did nothing wrong, who went through horribly traumatic events and had a not great reaction to those events, and it manifested itself as a fire starter. And he was continually, again and again and again, wronged by the most cruel things that our society can do to people. And now he finds himself desperate to belong somewhere. And who is there waiting for him? Who is there waiting with open arms to say, "Yeah, isn't it terrible how all those people treated you bad? We here, we're going to treat you good." It's a cult, man. It's like, this is exactly what cults do. This is how they get people that have been ostracized by society. Come here and be part of my thing. My thing is much better.
Yeah, no, it's just piling the tragedy upon the tragedy, right? Because you could imagine like an alternate version of the story where Trashcan Man was instead swept up into Mother Abigail's group and met those people instead, and it's like, I don't know exactly what would have happened, but it does really seem like all he needs is some sort of basic level of recognition of his humanity.
Yeah.
And that would get, I don't know if that would solve all of his problems, but it would go a long way toward rehabilitating him. And people are willing to work with him, but these people, obviously there's some problems with this organization that he's just joined. For sure. I also wanted to just mention, like you pointed out, we haven't seen Lloyd in quite a while, and we meet him again here, and it's interesting because obviously it's the same old Lloyd, but at the same time he seems like he's 50 years older somehow. Like I don't know if you feel that at all, but like he just seems like he's seen some shit since we last met him.
Sure.
And maybe he's accumulated some regrets, but maybe not enough regrets to change his course, but some history has passed. I think he definitely still takes pride in his role as the number 2, but it's like I don't know. I felt maybe I'm reading some amount into like the voice performance, but I feel like this is a little bit more experienced of a Lloyd.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair read for sure. I mean, he's definitely seems, I don't want to say wiser, but but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, he's who knows what he's experienced while he's been there. I mean, we know kind of he's like crucifixions, lots of
Yeah.
crucifixions.
Right. Lots of having to like, be the arm of quote unquote justice. And yeah, it's a I guess one thing that maybe the clearest way of saying it is just like he has not he is not now being portrayed as a figure of comic relief. Really,
Mm-hmm.
he's that part of his character is gone now.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true.
Yeah.
So if you're like, for example, making an adaptation of the story, you would want to make him more than just an insane comic relief character the whole time, wouldn't you? Just hypothetically.
Hypothetically, yeah. Hypothetically, you would that would seem to be a waste, honestly.
Yeah, it really would.
Great, cool.
So back with the kid, they find themselves at an impossible roadblock, and the kid sends Trashcan up to check how far that roadblock goes. Trash sees this as his chance to escape, but as he does so, he eventually comes across the Eisenhauer Tunnel, which is completely blocked. And the book then goes on to specifically compare this to Larry's experience with the Lincoln Tunnel, which again we said we haven't seen Larry in a while, so it's good to be reminded that he exists every so often.
Yeah. For sure, yeah. Meanwhile, Larry's adding another 15 people to his party.
but I love the writing here so much, Matt. As he looks upon this tunnel and decides what to do, it says, "Trashcan Man was a beaten thing, used to accepting the punchings and pummelings of both fate and his own inexplicable nature, and doing so with a bowed head. He had been further unmanned, brainwashed almost by his cataclysmic encounter with the kid. He had been whooshed along at speeds high enough to induce brain damage. He had been threatened with extinction if he could not drink a whole can of beer without stopping and without throwing up afterward. He had been sodomized with a pistol barrel. He had been nearly dumped 1,000 feet straight down from the edge of the turnpike. On top of this, could he summon enough courage to crawl through a hole bored straight through the base of a mountain, a hole where he might encounter who knows what horror in the dark? He could not." It's just so matter of factly, right? This general idea of like, could he do this thing? No, he could not do this thing,
Yeah.
and he will not do this thing.
Yeah. Again, there's the evocation of pity. As bad as Larry ever got, he could still act in his own selfish survival interests, right? Which is at least some basic level of humanity, whereas Trashcan is just totally broken and not even capable of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so Trashcan Man is kind of forced to turn back, and he does so, and he attempts to sneak around the kid, but is caught, and he's about to be killed when some wolves arrive. And this is exactly that moment you were talking about where you're like, woohoo, the wolves.
Uh-huh.
Wait, the wolves are bad, actually. It is remarkable the way books can kind of manipulate you and play with you here. Where yes, because of the situation, because of the context of the moment, we want the Man in Black to win here.
It's actually satisfying. It's actually, I mean, if anything, I'm going to be honest. I was like, oh man, he makes it back into the car. We don't get to see him get ripped apart limb from limb by the wolves.
Yeah, we don't know. I don't know. I find this fate even more cruel than that, right? This idea that the wolves kind of just force him back into his car, and he is forced into his car, which he would refuse to leave no matter what. And now he will never leave it, because the implication here is that the wolves will sit there patiently waiting until he either starves or steps out of the car and is eaten.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a great irony. I just hate him so much that I wanted to see him get eaten.
I understand, man. I understand. Yeah. But the wolves don't hurt the Trashcan Man. The wolves are friendly to the Trashcan Man. They lead him, and so that's how he gets through the Eisenhauer Tunnel, is with the strength of the wolves. I like this a lot because once again, we compare this to Larry and his journey through the Lincoln Tunnel, right? Where Larry was able to kind of summon the strength and the courage to get through it on his own, and then later with Rita. But Trashcan Man cannot do that, and he needs the support of others. He needs it, and unfortunately, the only person there offering that support is a bunch of wolves.
Yeah, and you know, of course, when Gollum needs to go in and out of Mordor, he has to go through a tunnel, which is guarded by supernatural evil, which he has to make a sacrifice to in order to make his way through. So I guess the kid is the sacrifice, and the wolves are obviously Shelob. You thought we were going to get through this book without me referencing Shelob. You were wrong.
Wait, what? I don't understand.
The wolves are Shelob.
How?
Because it's a tunnel.
That's it? That's the only reason?
It's because he has to go through the tunnel to get to the Dark Realm, right?
Sure, man.
But he couldn't go through it on his own. He needed to be escorted by the guardian of the tunnel.
I fully support your Lord of the Rings comparisons, but this is the thinnest one you've ever made.
You think so, Scott?
I do.
I think I can go thinner. I do feel like anytime there's a tunnel, Scott, I'm going to mention Shelob. I'm just letting you know that.
I guess that's fair.
But actually, I think I forgot to reference Shelob when we were reading the Talisman. What an oversight!
Yeah, what an idiot! What'd you do that for?
So sorry, everyone. I happened to see a video this week. This is a tangent, by the way. I've ended that conversational thread. About a timber wolf with like a prey animal in its mouth running by the side of the road, and then the wolf hops over a fence, crosses the road, hops over another fence. These are, you know, probably like waist high fences. The animal in the wolf's jaws is a calf, a baby cow, and calves on average weigh about 80 pounds when they're born. So I just mentioned this because I sort of chronically can't actually understand how big wolves are and how terrifying wolves are.
They're so big. I think we just make them like we imagine them as dog sized.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they're massive. Yeah.
I do imagine them as dog sized, and it's very hard for me to like correctly adjust my brain for some reason. I don't know why exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Matt. So he makes it on across the other side, and he starts heading to Las Vegas, and we get this passage that I find absolutely fascinating, so we have to talk about it. Here we go. The beauty of religious mania is that it has the power to explain everything. Once God, or Satan, is accepted as the first cause of everything which happens in the mortal world, nothing is left to chance or change. Once such incantory phrases as "we see now through a glass darkly" and "mysterious are the ways he chooses his wonders to perform" are mastered, logic can be happily tossed out the window. Religious mania is one of the few infallible ways of responding to the world's vagaries because it totally eliminates pure accident. To the true religious maniac, it's all on purpose. It was quite likely for this reason that the Trashcan Man talked to a crow for nearly 20 minutes on the road west of Vale, convinced it was either an emissary of the Dark Man or the Dark Man himself. Hey Matt?
Uh-huh.
What about Mother Abigail?
Yeah.
And he works in mysterious ways.
What about that, Scott?
This is what I love about this. So first of all, I just want to say at the top, this is stylistically a complete departure from the type of writing this book is. Like, this is really a moment where the book almost seems to be speaking directly to you, the reader. And that has not happened in The Stand very often.
Yeah,
it is kind of like an aside, or like a footnote almost. And it's really fascinating because I think for a couple of reasons. First of all, Mother Abigail is the big elephant in the room here, where we have to go, okay, but why are they different? Why are they different? And I'll let you speak to that in a second. But the other one is, it's very possible that the crow that the Trashcan Man was talking to actually was an emissary of the Dark Man, because we in the universe that we're living in right now actually do have higher powers that are seemingly dictating the events of the book. So it is, there's a lot of irony in the statement as well.
Yeah.
So what do you make of this, Matt? What's your reaction here?
I was gonna throw you the ball, Scott. I don't have a clean answer here that really I think this is a thing that King is exploring because
Mhm.
like they're, I mean, is it fair to say they're both religious maniacs? Doesn't feel right coming out of my mouth, but Mother Abigail has her worldview where this is a great contest between God and Satan, and she
Mhm.
has her orders from God. She literally says, "God told me to do this,"
Mhm.
and she's convicted. She's convinced of it, right? And same as this guy. And I mean, the funny thing is, like textually, they're both right. I think.
Mhm.
I mean, there's definitely supernatural stuff at work in this world. So it's
Yeah.
like, it's I don't know. It's a functional religious mania because of the world they happen to live in, I guess.
Yeah.
I really don't know. I don't know where to land on this.
I don't think we're supposed to know where to land on this because I think it's going to take the events of the novel to actually conclude on this definitively. But I am so glad you picked up on it in exactly the way I kind of wanted you to, because it is, you do find yourself scratching your head at this. And I think part of the reason King took this stylistic departure in this sentence is he wanted us to go, hey, now wait a minute. You didn't type this in the Mother Abigail chapter, but you could have. You absolutely could have. Like I said, like we talked about it last week, how the book seems very sympathetic to Mother Abigail's form of spirituality, in a way that many of King's hyper religious characters and his other stories are not. And we talked about maybe the why of that, the how she enacts her spirituality is different from how those characters do. And I think the same is kind of true um, of Trashcan Man as well. But like,
Yeah,
you like, in a way she's not directly saying it, but in a way Mother Abigail is saying my life for you to
yeah,
God, like constant, like that is what she is doing. So I mean the only difference here is which power they are choosing to align with. but
yeah.
but this but this sentence, this paragraph, is speaking specifically to the worship of power in general. I mean, he puts in here once God or Satan here, so like it's
Right.
not just, he's not just commenting on the ability to fully indoctrinate yourself into bad, evil, quote unquote, systems of belief, but just systems of belief in general.
Yeah, we remarked last week on the fact that Mother Abigail is willing to do what God asks her, even if there is no implied reward, even
Hmm.
if it only promises suffering, right? And
Yeah.
we said, well, that's what distinguishes her from kind of the bad king characters or the bad religious king characters. But like, it doesn't really seem like Trashcan has been promised much of anything by the Dark Man. So he's and he's also gone on this spirit quest across the desert and had to go through all this suffering. So I don't think we can say like, oh well, Mother Abigail is willing to suffer for her beliefs, but Trashcan Man is, he's being enticed by promises. It's like not really. I mean, he was told that he gets to be the artillery, right? And it's like, okay,
Hmm.
well, maybe that's worth something to him, but it doesn't seem that clear cut to me.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things is that what he gets in Las Vegas is acceptance and happiness, right? Like from here we cut back to Trash having lunch with the boys, and they all, like, he's terrified that people are going to look at him and stare at him and laugh at him, and nobody does. And they don't make fun of him, they don't reject him, they just see him and accept him, and for the first time in his life he feels that happiness. But this is not something that the Dark Man promised him, right? The Dark
Right.
Man didn't say, come here and you will be accepted, you will find happiness, you will find everything that's been missing in your life and you didn't even know about it. That's just like a bonus, I guess
Yeah.
we could call it. And so you're right that he didn't he didn't necessarily agree to do these things on the transactional level of, I'll do this for you, you do something for me type thing.
Yeah. Well, and on the flip side, Mother Abigail is getting companionship and so forth as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
Um,
true. True.
So really, I think there are more symmetries than there are differences between the two.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Weirdly
true.
enough.
Yeah, which is insane in
Yeah.
a way, but I think you're absolutely right. But of course, the thing we have to say about this companionship, this happiness, this openness and friendliness is all a mirage. It's all bullshit. It's all manufactured. It's not real, because we learn that the next day a man is crucified. A man named Heck Drogan. Lloyd knows this man. Lloyd ate lunch with this man, but this man committed the absolutely unforgivable crime of using drugs, which it doesn't seem like that would be something that would be a crime punishable by death in Sin City, headed up by the bad guys. Yeah, right. Like it's seemingly contradictory to everything you would maybe expect the bad guy stronghold to be. But no, actually, we see here that they have a very, very, very severe zero tolerance for drug use. And so this is kind of the Man in Black kind of becoming a, not necessarily like a free love, like party type city, but actually a extremely fascistic, like absolute rule by fear type of thing that he's constructing here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like he's making a hell on earth. Like he's taking these poor broken people, he's sort of choosing because they're broken, and then he's punishing them for the ways in which they're broken.
Yeah,
which they basically can't help. Which again sounds like how you would design hell. Like it's a place to punish sinners with their own sin. It's just yeah, and of course this further breaks their spirits and makes them more willing to just be his unquestioning servants, because once you have crucified your third friend, you're just kind of broken. You're just kind of dead inside. You'll do whatever.
Yeah. So again, I mean, if you were making an adaptation of this book and you wanted to depict Flag's Las Vegas, it would not make sense to make a Las Vegas that is full of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? Because that would seem antithetical to everything that Flag is doing here, right?
Yes,
right?
That I don't know why you would mention that, but yes, that would seem to be a misunderstanding of what the text is saying about.
Look, man, I'm just talking in hypotheticals. I'm not saying anything about anything.
All right. Yeah, I believe that. Happy crappy.
So I want to talk about this moment here. I think this is the second beat of what we talked about a little bit earlier in the episode of Harold's choice. Here is Lloyd's choice here, or sorry, Trashcan Man's choice, because Lloyd prepares to give Trashcan the symbol that he got back in the prison, the stone with the eye in it. And we see this. The truth was in Lloyd's eyes, too clear not to be recognized. And Trashcan Man knew he could never weep and grovel, not before him, not before anyone, but especially not before him, and claim he hadn't understood. Take this, and you take everything, Lloyd's eyes said. And what's a part of everything? Why, Heck Drogan, of course. Heck and the cement-lined hole in the ground, the hole just big enough to take the butt end of Heck's cross tree. He reached for it slowly. His hand paused just before the outstretched fingers could touch the gold chain. This is my last chance to be Donald Merwin Elbert. But another voice, one which spoke with greater authority, but with a certain gentleness, like a cool hand on a fevered brow, told him that the time of choices had long since passed. If he chose Donald Merwin Elbert now, he would die. He had sought the dark man of his own free will, if there is such a thing, for the Trashcan men of the world. He had accepted the dark man's favors. And so, therefore, he doesn't have a choice here, and he takes the stone, Matt. So, talk about this with me for a bit.
I mean, I really love the parenthetical. If there is such a thing as free will for the Trashcan men of the world, it's such a fascinating little grenade thrown into the middle of a sentence.
Yeah.
Because as we said earlier in the episode, this is a guy who started behind the eight ball in every possible way. Just he's been shit on his whole life from birth onward. And like, so what hope that was there for him? Poor Smeagol didn't ask to find the ring. He found it, And then once he found it, did he ever have a chance, or was that just like a lightning bolt out of the blue that cursed him to now be beholden to this thing for the rest of his unnaturally long life? And that's what's happening, to this character. Like what else could he have done, really? Right? I love the idea of like, is there really such a thing as free will? Because we just talked about the idea that like Harold, abdicated his choice, and it's like Harold really could have gone either way, but somebody like Trashcan Man, it's like I don't really see how it could have gone any other way. Like he's like, you really expect this guy to finally at this point in his life somehow make the right choice, and then that choice gets him killed,
Yeah.
I don't know, just pure pity.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I still want to believe he could have chosen the other path, but I think the text is pretty clear here. And I think that the thing that I love about it is that in retrospect actually makes Harold's, oh, I didn't have a choice anyway, or I've already made the choice, or I've gone too far already. Like it makes that look absurd in comparison. Cause like Trashcan Man situation is he's in the lion's den surrounded by lions. The lions are handing him a rope and he's like, oh, if I take this rope, I will be forever in with the lions, but maybe I shouldn't. Whereas Harold is sitting by a campfire, debating reading a diary or not, and he's like, oh, I must choose. No, but I've gone too far. I must. It's like, fuck you, Harold. Like, come on, man. You have all the choice in the world compared to this man who's gone through these terrible things. Yeah. So it's a tragedy. The story of Trashcan Man is the story of a tragedy for sure.
Yeah, the direct comparison to Harold makes me hate Harold even more for sure. Yeah.
There is this interesting moment that happens here, Matt, because Heck calls out Trash for help, and he pretends that he doesn't know him. He actually denies him. He says, "I don't know you." He says it three times, Matt. The man who is about to be crucified is denied by his friend 3 times. There's probably nothing significant about that at all.
No, it's probably nothing. I don't. There's some biblical references in this book. I don't know if you've noticed them, but yeah.
Well, I mean, just the idea of crucifixion in general is like, once again, it is interesting that the devil here is taking the Christ imagery again and using it again. And then we have the literal story of the crucifixion being kind of recreated with some random drug addict here and Trashcan Man as the, which one, who was that denied Jesus? Was that fuck, which one was it? I'm such a bad Catholic.
So bad, yeah. Let's go through them all. No,
I'm not going to do that. The one that did that. The one that did that,
yes. It's interesting to me that we did talk previously about
Peter. It was Peter. I looked it up. It was Peter.
Okay, yeah. So Abigail, we talked about how Abigail, her Christianity is extremely Old Testament inflected and really sort of almost entirely missing the sort of forgiveness and love doctrine of Christ. All the Christ imagery is showing up associated with flag.
True.
With the Antichrist, we got crosses, we got we got Peter and his denial. We got all these moments. I guess I'll just pay attention to see if this keeps coming up. But so far, I think has the text actually like said explicitly like he's the Antichrist, or is this just something we're supposed to read between the lines?
I think Mother Abigail has said it.
Okay, yeah.
But that doesn't mean she knows definitively. I think that could just be her assumption as well.
I mean, it seems like the text is gestured at it 17 different ways, so it's clear. It's just anyway. I love it. Oh yeah, there's one thing that we didn't pull out this week was the mention. I don't have the exact line in front of me, but the description of the Dark Man's army as a rough beast whose hour has come around at last, which is from the Yeats poem, right? Or it's the Antichrist is described that way in the poem, so it's amazing. I love it.
Oh yeah, I didn't even catch that callback. That's wonderful. I love that so much.
Yeah.
So having passed his test, Trashcan Man is invited into the belly of the beast and finally gets to meet Randall Flagg himself, which is like the perfect capstone on this little novella we've just experienced over these last 50 pages. So he gets to meet the guy he was searching for this whole time, and the chapter ends with Flagg telling Trash there's work to be done out in the desert and that a great burning is coming. We don't know what any of that means, but it's not good. It's not good.
No, burning bad.
Burning bad. There you go, Matt. So that's going to do it for us this week. We end on burning bad. So that's the kind of great analysis you'll get from Kingslingers. Yeah. Burning is bad.
Bad.
Jesus, good? Question mark? But that is it for our reading this week. We will continue next week with 3 chapters, Matt. 3 whole chapters next week. It's a crazy week. We're going to be doing chapters 49, 50, and 51 next week.
Nice.
Before we go this week, we have to do our discussion question. Our question from last week was, what is your favorite diary entry in fiction? This was in honor of the Franny Goldsmith diaries that we talked about pretty extensively last week and a little bit this week. So got a lot of great answers here. Matt, let's begin with the first one.
Just stand 8460 says, here's another reason to mention Jerusalem's Lot. The writer of these letters is visiting an old abandoned family home outside a small town. He and his companion witness some truly horrifying things while still remaining in the house. His mental state declines, he becomes obsessed with some dark rumors about his ancestry, and he takes trips to a nearby abandoned village called Jerusalem's Lot based on some of those rumors. I love it because he tells so much about everything I just said, but somehow in a cheerful tone, almost like it's on the edge of the conduct of a gentleman, but also blatant toxic masculinity. When I read it, I can't help but hear him speaking in a high Oxford, England accent. But since it takes place in Maine, I'll just go with transatlantic, aka mid-Atlantic accent.
Yeah, that's a great example. I forgot that so much of Jerusalem's Lot is epistolary.
Yeah.
And this is your quarterly reminder that the Epics show Chapelwaite, based on this short story, is actually really fucking good, and you should all go watch it.
I love that. I loved it. Really, really worth it. Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of an epistolary vampire story, we actually got like 12 people who answered Dracula, which is fair because that's a great answer, and actually the one I was thinking of when I came up with this question. So we're not going to read every single Dracula answer, Matt, but we did pull out a couple of them. So first we have Stephen Flagg, who says, in literature, I would have to go with Dracula. I think this enhanced the sense of growing fear as well as helped the reader understand Mina's fascination with Dracula. Plus, the letters home from Jonathan show first his apprehension, then his outright horror at the thing he has decided to assist in moving to his own city.
Cool. I still need to read Dracula.
Yes, you do.
I feel like I've said that like 6 times, but yes. And then similarly, Mountain Dave 1979 says, my current favorite use of the epistolary style is Bram Stoker's Dracula. Earlier this summer, I was hipped to this project on Substack called Dracula Daily, which runs from May 3rd to November 7th. Just as it does in the novel. Every day that something happens in the novel, you get an email with that day's journal entry, newspaper clipping, medical record, etc. Some things are presented on the date they occur, as opposed to when it is presented in the novel, such as the log entries of the ship Demeter. This has been a fun project, and I look forward to getting my Dracula Daily email in the mornings. I've never consumed a book in this style. Real time, so to speak. That's a really fun idea.
Yeah. Is this the first time you're hearing about Dracula Daily?
Yeah.
I heard about it a few months ago, and I was like, what the fuck is everyone why is everyone talking about Dracula all of a sudden? What is this Dracula Daily thing? And I was like, oh, it's just the book. They're just reading Bram Stoker's Dracula just in pieces. Oh, okay. That's really cool, actually.
Yeah, it seems like it might be a little bit more multimedia than that, though. I don't know. I'm curious enough to look into it, though.
I think it's literally just the pieces of the novel that happened on those days are hand fed to you. I think that's it. I think that's really it.
I wonder how many other things lend themselves to this. Probably not. Probably mostly things that involve diary entries. So.
I would. Yeah, that would make sense. Yes,
I would do it.
Next up, we have Pear Jane, who says, I'm a middle-aged woman who read roughly every teenage book published between 1975 and 1990. So there's Margaret's Conversations with God, Veronica's Body Count Tally and Heather's, and I've read Anne Frank's diary at 14 and every decade since. But I'm going with an answer that likely only Baby Can You Dig Your Sam will recognize. It's from the 5th book in the On Our Own series, a spinoff of a teen romance collection called Sweet Dreams. The series got a spinoff because the writer, who is usually good for the genre, was unusually good for the genre, and she created an 8-book universe that was more about the two lead characters' friendship than their romances. The writer went on to a successful career as a mystery novelist under the pseudonym Reese Bowen. In book 5, titled Growing Pains, the cute wannabe actress Toni details some of the action in her diary, and we get to witness the ups and downs of her relationship with Brand? There's a question mark here. I didn't say it like that. We begin to approach what's a clear breakup. In classic teen angst style, we learn of her breakup in a one-line diary entry. Today, the world ended. So melodramatic, yes, but I loved the drama and simple impact of the 4-word diary entry. We know what happened, but we get zero details. Read on, Macduff. The fact that it came to mind 35 years later is not for nothing, used sparingly. The one-liners of the chapter and diary entries can have the impact of an emotional sledgehammer. The Shining uses it to great effect in a chapter called The Verdict. We won't read that, Matt, because you haven't read The Shining.
Okay.
And you might read The Shining at some undetermined point in the future, maybe.
Okay. I am a fan of 4-word chapters, as you know.
Another vague worm reference that nobody will get. Keep it up, Matt.
I will. Cool. I mean, this is fun. I also have guilty pleasure, memories of books of this type. Definitely not these specific ones, but
sure,
yeah. And I agree. The sort of the diary entry style is a great way of conveying like the angst and immediacy of teenagerhood.
Yep.
A lot of good stuff of that genre. All right, Baby Can You Dig Your Stam says, I'm not sure if you've finally gotten around to watching Heavenly Creatures. We covered it on the Doofcast last week. Yeah. But my answer is Pauline's Diary, with entries, some voiceover, like, we have decided how sad it is for other people that they cannot appreciate our genius. And eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may be dead. And the next time I write in this diary, Mother will be dead. How odd, yet how pleasing. Pauline's Diary puts us into the precocious but disturbed mind of a matricide. Melanie Linsky is perfect in her debut role and just as mesmerizing as the young Kate Winslet, one of Peter Jackson's best. Nice gunslinger reference there, and also yes, really. I don't know. I'm embarrassed it took me as long as it did to watch this movie.
Same.
It's funny. I won't even call it like a pleasant movie. It was like kind of harrowing, actually.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad I watched it, and it was really good to talk about it with you.
It's absolutely remarkable. You should all go watch it. Yeah, definitely. All right. Next up, we have Kid's Kitchen, who says, my favorite journal style writing is Pygmy by Chuck Palahniuk. It's a very absurd collection of official reports submitted by an undercover foreign agent of questionable age and motivation. Agent 67 takes a trip to KFC, and their mascot is described as courageous, renowned of history, Colonel Sanders, image forever accompanied, odor of sacrificial meat. The fryers are eternal flame offering, savory perfume roasted flesh. The audiobook version is great, although there is plenty of dark humor, so be warned.
Chuck Palahniuk and dark humor, really?
No, impossible. Have you ever read that book?
Not this one, no. I've read a couple of other Chuck Palahniuk's. They're all very disturbing. That's his MO.
Yeah, that's his deal.
Yep. Cool. All right. Garlips says, as a survival horror aficionado, it would be remiss of me not to bring up the role that diaries, notes, and memos play in those games, allowing a glimpse into the experience of others through increasingly bizarre and upsetting eyewitness accounts. Anyway, there's this one diary in Resident Evil 1 that is very famous. It is one man's account as he slowly slips into zombieism. A rather intelligent chess player degenerates into someone who eats another guy's face, and even the format of the diary and the writing quality break down, leaving the last entry simply titled as "For Itchy Tasty." chilling. And then the guy comes out of a cupboard behind you, and your 10-year-old soul leaves its body. Thanks, Capcom. That's really fun.
That is very fun. That's very fun indeed. I'm so glad someone brought this up, because I think diary entries are so important to how story is told in video games these days. I think like Half-Life did this thing where it told a story without cutscenes, and people were like, "Whoa, how we do that?" And their decision was just a bunch of diary entries, which I think it is very effective in some games like Resident Evil. Like I think it used very effectively there. I think they're used too often in games these days, but like it used correctly, they are really, really wonderful.
Yeah, there's been a lot of innovation in this space, I would say. Like there's
Sure.
Audio logs or something that can be hit or miss. Very often work really well, and then sometimes you're like, could you shut up so I can pay attention to like what's happening? So yeah, anyway, it's a cool medium.
Constant Reader 19 says, now that I'm caught up, I've been listening to various other books between the stand readings for the week. I've been listening to another post-apocalyptic lone survivor type books to stay in the right frame of mind. And this brings me to an excellent convergence with the book I read in between the stand last week and this week's discussion question, Robinson Crusoe. I thought I had read Robinson Crusoe. I really did. But in my case, it was like Matt's cultural soaking in of Stephen King things. I know about Robinson Crusoe like everyone does, but I realized a few minutes in that I'd never actually read it. The sheer amount and variety of adventures packed into a book that rings in at just about 10 hours, this 18th century English language conventions, and the very soothing Scottish brogue of the audiobook reader made for a different and entirely pleasurable listen. I wanted to go on longer. It truly did paint a picture of another world, and now I realized firsthand why Robinson Crusoe is such an icon even to this day. When originally published, it didn't even have Daniel Defoe's name anywhere on it, but was presented as a true autobiography.
I didn't know that. That's
I didn't
hilarious.
know that either. It's funny because I was like, the whole time I was reading this answer, I was like, I didn't think Robinson Crusoe was epistolary, and so that's kind of how Constant Reader got in under the rule wire with this one is that it was presented as autobiography.
Yeah, that's fun.
But maybe Robinson Crusoe is epistolary. It's been a really long time since I read this book.
Yeah, I've never read it. I watched the movie. Wasn't it a movie with Pierce Brosnan?
I'm dumb. It is epistolary.
I never read it anymore.
There's been like 7,000 versions of the movie. It is very possible that there was one with Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, classic though. Yeah, that's cool. I'll read that someday. That'll be on my
the
list.
1997 version stars Pierce Brosnan. Yes.
Yeah, I knew it. All right, Steve D says, have to go all in on Dr. Mark Watney from the film The Martian, as played by America's sweetheart Matt Damon. The video diaries are engaging, funny, and oftentimes desperate. I've yet to read the book. It's on the list, I swear, but the diary scenes in the movie really work. Well, Steve, the entire book is epistolary, so
it is. Yep.
So good pick.
Yeah.
I think this was one of the ones that I figured people might pick, at least in part because we just read another book by Andy Weir over on the book club. And that reminded me of The Martian.
Yes. We read Project Hail Mary and had our episode on it just last Friday. So if you haven't checked that out, do so. It was a good episode. Really good book as well.
Really, really like that book. Yeah.
Last but not least, we have Sigma, who says, Hello. I wanted to record a message for you to help you get settled in on your first night. I'm showing my youth here, but Phone Guy from Five Nights at Freddy's is the best example that comes to mind. He's a strange character. We know nothing of him, but he has several recordings that help, confuse, and terrify the player. He has a history with the company and is aware of something fucked with the animatronics. He's affable and incompetent in a charming sort of way. He lets you in on details he doesn't fully understand, which only makes his tapes more tantalizing. The first night phone calls is etched in my mind. My favorite line is, they used to be allowed to walk around during the day too, but then there was the bite of 87. Yeah, it's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know? Blood drops that line so casually. Have you ever played Five Nights at Freddy's?
I have not played Five Nights at Freddy's, but my son had a period of being obsessed with Five Nights at Freddy's, and he played it and he would watch the YouTube videos of it. So I know every molecule of information about Five Nights at Freddy's because he would tell me about it.
Isn't it scary? He was fine with that?
He loves survival horror stuff. And also, like, there's a whole subgenre of survival horror that is clearly marketed at kids, sort of, where it also has like scary themes and stuff, but is aesthetically child friendly.
Okay.
It's interesting.
Is that Five Nights at Freddy's? I didn't know that. I've never played it, so
it seems to be. I mean,
I know broadly what it is.
It definitely is scary, yes. But he likes that stuff.
Okay.
He enjoys scary things. But yeah, no, it's a fun concept, right? I mean, the concept, for those who don't know, is basically it's like a survival horror video game where like you're in like a kind of animatronic
Chuck E. Cheese
type place, but of course the robots are, alive and evil. And then there's like tons of lore, actually, which, see, now I'm going off the rails. there is tons of lore.
Of course there is.
Yeah.
Cool. That's great. I'm glad we got 2 video game examples here, because I think, like I said, video games use this a lot.
Yeah.
All right, but that is it for last week's question. Thank you to everyone who submitted those. We did get some that we had to algorithm away, but also there were some I just had to eliminate because you had spoilers for future King books that Matt may or may not read sometime in the future, some undetermined, unknown future time. What are you laughing for?
Oh, nothing, Scott. Just it's just very funny.
All right, so moving on to this week's question. Matt, you wanna take care of this one?
This one is, what's your favorite action sequence intended to be very visceral and realistic?
I think this is in honor of the horrible yet extremely visceral and realistic action sequence that opened chapter 47 this week, right?
Yeah, we could rephrase this as violence sequence instead of action sequence.
Yeah, maybe we should do that. Favorite violence sequence. Yeah. Doesn't kind of roll off the tongue in the same way, but it's fine. That's fine. All right, that is going to do it for us wow. That's going to do it for us here on Kingslingers this week. There's a sentence. Next week, we will continue the stand, as we said, with chapters 49, 50, and 51. Matt, I can't believe it, but we're over halfway through this book now, and we're just trucking right along. It's going to be over before we know it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm enjoying it so much. I'm at that point where I don't want it to end, Mm-hmm. So luckily we got a lot left, though. We do
have a lot left. But next week it'll be 3 more chapters and 70-ish more pages.
Nice. So remember, you can reach out to us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or over on Twitter at kingslingerspod. And of course, the subreddit is probably the simplest, most straightforward way to hang out with other Kingslingers listeners and answer the discussion question.
Absolutely. And if you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, we strongly recommend you do so. You can find us just about everywhere. We actually had a comment on YouTube this week asking us why there aren't more views on the YouTube episodes for this podcast. And the answer to that is pretty simple and quick. It's that most people listen to it in other places. So most people do not listen to it on YouTube. They listen to it on Stitcher or Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any of the other places. So if you're listening on YouTube and you're like, I wish there was a more convenient place to listen to this, check out one of those other ones.
Yeah, and YouTube does not promote audio only content. They they've
completely moved away from that now. Yeah.
So the fact that we have videos that have no video, YouTube doesn't. It kind of buries them.
Our algorithm punishes you question answerers, but YouTube's algorithm punishes us.
It's the circle of life. So yeah, if you like Kingslingers and you want to support us, then please consider donating to patreon.com/doofmedia. Special thanks this week to new patrons Len, Bonnie, and are you going to watch the Quantum Leap reboot?
Yes, that was their name, Matt. That was their name.
Well, number 1, I hadn't heard of a Quantum Leap reboot. Number 2, almost certainly yes, if there is one, and it's real, and this is just made up.
No, there is. It apparently comes out this year.
Does it star Scott Bakula?
No.
Not interested.
It stars... No, this website sucks. Never mind. It doesn't matter. Yes, the answer is yes. We're going to watch the Quantum Leap review 100%. Way to sneak a question into their Patreon.
I love Quantum.
Nobody get in the habit of this. I don't want I don't want your names on Patreon to be 40 questions long.
Yeah.
But of course, if you want to ask us a question and cannot afford to support us right now, that is absolutely okay. You can wait until the Q&A episodes of our podcast, and of course, help us out by sharing this podcast with all the Stephen King loving friends. It's a very exciting time right now. Stephen King's fairy tale is now out, and so there's a new book on the horizon. So there's a lot of talk about Stephen King right now, and what a great time to say, hey, you like that guy? Well, check out these guys that also like that guy, and they talk about the fact that they like him. You should do that.
Yeah.
This week's Spotlight review comes from Anthony Deshane, who gives us 5 stars and says, awesome podcast. Just listen to episode 1. Don't know how I'm finding the podcast now, but this is awesome. I'm a total Tower junkie, and the Dark Tower series is my all-time favorite book series ever. Well, thank you, Anthony. I don't know if you're going to be hearing this since that review came out not too long ago and you were just on episode 1, so maybe you'll hear this in a little bit. But you ever, Matt, you ever wonder with these reviews that's like, say, I've listened to one episode and I really, really love it, 5 stars. You ever wonder if they're like 30 episodes in, they're like, I don't really like this anymore. But they've already left the review, so we got you.
I hope so. It's hard for me to imagine leaving a review after only 1 episode because I almost never leave any reviews because I'm a bad person.
Yeah, do what we say and not what we do, because exactly. I've never left a review on a single podcast in my life.
I think I might have left 1, maybe.
For shame. Yeah. Except for on ours when I was doing like feeder reviews.
Yeah.
You'll never crack my username code on these reviews. You'll never know it's me.
No.
I don't think I've actually done that. I think I did that on like our first show, and that was it.
Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't. God, that was so long ago. I don't even remember.
I wouldn't abuse the system like that. I'm a nice guy.
Yeah,
Matt, I'm a nice guy.
I know you're a nice guy. You would, and the more you tell yourself that, the more it becomes true.
It's true. I am a nice guy. All right, folks. We'll see you right back here next week for these 2 nice guys. I'll go through more of The Stand. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.